Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. Well, if you're a fan of coffee and tea, most fruits, nuts and spices, even dairy products, then you should be very grateful for the honeybee. Now, pollinators like honeybees make about a third of the food we eat possible, and their population worldwide took a hit over the last 12 years or so. So on this episode, we'll take a look at the situation now and how we can all help keep the bees buzzing. To start us off, here's Andy Guevara with a local Beekeepers annual harvest.
This one could be queenless.
Our honey odyssey began in the spring when we suited up to learn about bee behavior.
So this is the time of year that it's perfect for them. They're bringing in pollen, the nectar.
That nectar is broken down into simple sugars by the bees and stored inside a honeycomb. Beekeeper Albert Singlinger smokes the bees to keep them calm and explains we should move slowly.
That's probably got 50,000 bees in it, 60,000 bees maybe.
And despite the hives filled with hundreds of thousands of the winged creatures, there's no dramatic buzzing to be heard. These bees are not angry. They're busy, flying miles to collect, then deposit pollen and nectar.
It's very nutritious because it comes from all the trees and whatever's blooming. Some people get it for their allergies too.
Like rabbit brush, for example, a huge allergen in northern Nevada. But when the bees feed on it, the honey they create helps our bodies build immunity to it. And in the fall, it's time for the honey harvest. The full racks or honeycombs get dropped into a spinner.
Kind of get it lined up. The centrifugal force, as it spins around, out those little holes that we punch, the honey will come flying out, collect on the sides.
Then it pours out a spout and is collected in 5-gallon buckets.
Galena Creek, Mount Rose, we have hives in about 13 locations.
Different locations have different flowers, and that's why honey can vary in color, from pale yellow to almost red. The flavors can change too.
You see as it's coming out, it's got the wax, pollen mixed with that.
Later, the liquid gold will be strained to produce the beautiful jars we use at home. Covering the story, Andy Guevara, Channel 2 News.
All right, Al's not alone in this. Avid beekeepers all across Nevada are doing their part to boost our bee population. And Debbie Gilmer with the Mason Valley Beekeepers, you're one of them. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I understand you are in a long line of beekeepers. Tell me how you got involved.
My great-grandfather moved into Mason Valley in 1918, just 100 years ago this year. And he started beekeeping when he moved into the valley. And my grandfather carried it on, my father carried it on, and they sold the bees. They were commercial honey producers, and they sold the business about in the mid-70s. And about 12 years ago, my husband and I decided to get a colony of bees, and it's just exploded from there.
How does one get a colony of bees?
Well, there's several ways you can get bees, but what you need to do is get your equipment first so that when you actually get the bees that you're ready to put the bees in the equipment. So you can capture a swarm, you can get bees from another beekeeper, or you can actually purchase a package of bees which comes with about 10,000 bees and one queen bee.
Wow. Okay, so I want to talk about capturing a swarm because I think this is so fascinating. It had never occurred to me that this is a thing that happens, but just tell me what that is.
Okay, a swarm is a natural way for the colony of bees to propagate. So when they get crowded inside their hive, what they do is they know that they need to split. And so what happens is they start the production of new queens. And when they are about ready to emerge, the old queen leaves with half of the bees in the colony. And so when you see it on a tree branch or something, that queen has landed there. Half of those bees that left with her are clumped around her. So that is when they are the most mild, is because they don't have their babies to protect and they don't have a home to protect. So a swarm is actually when they're most docile.
Okay, so then they land somewhere, and is that necessarily where they're going to stay? As I understand, you can kind of direct where you want them to go from there?
You can. If a beekeeper captures them, depending on where they're at, they can knock them into a hive box. The trick is to capture the queen. Once the queen is in that box, all of the other bees that are flying around or crawling around will walk right into there, because each queen has its own pheromone. And so once they, the other bees that are by the queen will fan their pheromone, and those other bees will march right on in.
And we're talking potentially thousands, millions of bees.
Thousands, probably, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. This has to be kind of an exciting thing to do. Have you done it?
Capturing swarms is really fun.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
So if you are in northern Nevada and you see a clump of bees that maybe is in a place where it shouldn't be, you can call a beekeeper, right? And they'll capture that swarm and take it somewhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. There are 3 beekeeping clubs within northern Nevada, around the Reno area, and they all have swarm lists. So they have identified people who will go capture swarms, and their contact information is on their websites.
And this is really important because we do not want to be killing honeybees. We want to keep as many honeybees alive and healthy as possible because they're so important for our ecosystem and our food production.
Right, that's correct. And like you said, 1/3 of every spoonful of food that we eat is contributed to the pollination of a honeybee. Albert Einstein said if all the bees were to disappear, humankind would have 4 years on Earth. Wow. So they are very, very important to us.
And they'd be sad 4 years too, because it's things like almonds, apples, major spices, vanilla, cane sugar, I mean, all sorts of things. Basically every fruit you've ever liked, avocado, it's totally dependent on pollination from honeybees. And there's been a lot of concern recently over the last decade or so about the bee population dwindling because of something they call colony collapse disorder, which I understand is still a bit of a mystery. Do we know what causes this?
No, there's lots of research going on, but colony collapse disorder is like a disorder. And what the beekeeper will find is they will go look into their hive of bees. All of the adult foraging bees, the older bees, are no longer there. They have not come back to the hive. So you have 1 queen and just a handful of nurse bees in there, the young bees. And they don't know why those bees are not returning. So they have identified pretty much 4 issues that are contributed to the decline of the honeybees. One of them is pests, Aurora mite, which is a parasitic mite, pesticides, and another one is lack of pollinator habitat. And the third one is hive management, and that's what the beekeepers, how they are managing their hives. Right now, probably the majority of the bees in the entire United States are in California for the almond pollination. And those bees travel many, many thousands of miles every year pollinating different crops across the United States. So they attribute that to the stress that those bees are under that decreases their immune systems.
So people are actually moving the bees?
Yes, they go by semi-loads, and wow. Yes, in probably a couple of weeks you will see semi-loads on like Interstate 80 heading north. They're going up to Washington for apple pollination. Huh,
like
yeah.
Migrant workers. I had no idea that this happened. I always wondered why, every now and then you'll hear about a bee truck overturning, and I wondered why they're trucking bees. That makes perfect sense. But I didn't realize that that was necessary. Would it be necessary if the population weren't declining? Is it just because agriculture is so huge that we have to truck in more bees? Or would there be enough of a bee population if it were healthy?
Probably a little bit of both. They are putting in millions of new acres of almonds in California, and so the demand on more honeybees is so great in California. It's just not possible for beekeepers. The average loss is like 42% colony loss per year. So to make up that 42% and to increase that even more to cover all the pollination that's needed, it's quite a challenge.
Okay, so how do you do it? How do you do it, and how do we do it?
Well, what we do, and we do, this year we probably will have at least a 50% loss. And so In the spring, we can split colonies. If we have a really full, healthy colony, you can split it into two and introduce a new queen into it and start a new colony of bees. Or you can get a package of bees. You can go out and capture swarms. So those are the ways that we try to help even get back our 50% loss.
Okay, so for those of us who don't have the means or the yard capable to house a bee population, but we still want to help, there are some things that regular people can do, right? Planting the right plants?
Absolutely. Lack of bee habitat is huge, pollinator habitat. And most of the nurseries around will give you tips on what are good plants for honeybees. If you go to a nursery, what I like to do is just watch the flowers, and the honeybees will be there, and they will be on the plants that they prefer. So, and they like blue and purple. Mm-hmm. So those are usually the plants that you see them go to first.
Okay, I'd heard that plants that have a good wide surface for them to land on are popular. Mm-hmm. Was that mistaken?
No, that's true. But there's like 3,000 different native pollinators in Nevada as well. And they all serve different purposes. Like a bumblebee is a better pollinator for tomato plants because that blossom has to be shaken to be pollinated, and that bumblebee is heavy enough to do that. So it is a better pollinator of tomatoes. But you know, bats are pollinators, flies are pollinators, hummingbirds are pollinators, and they all pollinate different things.
Interesting. Okay, and then I know pesticide is a big one. Probably a lot of people don't think about when they spray their gardens trying to keep bugs off their flowers. They could also be hurting bees. So what's a good rule of thumb for that?
Okay, pesticides, and there's directions on the label, and you know, it's kind of funny because the other day I was at a store and I was looking at all the insecticides trying to figure out, you know, what the label says. A person really has to look hard on those labels. You have to peel them off the front of the insecticides, and you really have to search to see what the directions are. But don't spray when the flowers are blooming. Spray early in the morning or late evening when the bees have already gone back into the hive. Don't spray when it's windy. There's a lot of things that homeowners can do to help avoid killing honeybees.
Ideally, maybe don't spray at all, right?
Yes. You know, there's some natural insecticides out there. Try that and see, you know, depending on the insect that you have, see if it's effective on that plant and that insect.
Yeah, sometimes just a good spray of water will get them off of your
Soapy
plants.
water,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, okay. So what else should the public know before we go to break? Anything else that we can do to be helping things out?
Water. Bees take about 44 pounds of water per year per colony. And so people, you know, bees will go foraging 2 miles from their hive. And in the summertime when it is so hot, they need lots and lots of water. So keep the bird baths full, keep, you know, anything full of water for the bees to visit.
Okay, good to know. And then finally, if people want to learn more about this, you guys have a conference coming up. Tell us about that real quick before we go.
It's our 8th annual Nevada State Beekeepers Conference. We're really excited about it. It's going to run Friday, February 23rd, all the way through Sunday the 25th. And we have some top bee researchers and some really good talent, and we have fun, and it's a great place to interact with other beekeepers.
And learn about it if they're interested in starting their own.
That's right.
Okay, Debbie, thank you so much. I really appreciate
Thank
your
you
time.
very much.
Okay, well, coming up on Face the State, a first-of-its-kind project for Northern Nevada is getting off the ground, offering new hope to local veterans. I'll get an update on the new Northern Nevada Veterans Home right after the break.